They're very talented. Yes, absolutely. But like the heart for worship is just unbelievable. Thank you, Michael. Give it up for Michael. Serious about this. The Timberwolves, though, they're good. They're good this year. They're like actually good, right? Right, Gabe? You believe me? You bought in yet? Do you believe them yet? Are you waiting to see? You're going to wait and see? It's probably smart. I'm a Minnesota sports fan in the worst possible way because I've seen so much and so much disappointment as a Minnesota sports fan over the years. But I get my hopes up every single time, and I'm going to do it again. I'm excited for the Wolves. I bought a new jersey. I'm like, yes, Anthony Edwards, future MVP, right? All right, none of you guys came to hear me talk about sports. Maybe Gabe did. Maybe we can talk basketball afterward. Talk to me about how you're going to surpass Anthony Edwards someday, right? You're gonna come here. You're better than him anyways, right? What'd you say? Michael Jordan would get 2 points on you? Max 2 points. Best ever, but he hasn't faced Gabe yet, so you never know. How much would LeBron get on you, though? That's the question. 60? Okay, now that's ridiculous. All right, so we're gonna have a good old-fashioned sermon today, right? So sorry, I don't have any like cool, fun object lessons today, but what I have is the Word of God. And this message came to me as something that we're still continuing, and this is actually my final message of the For His Kingdom Vision series that we're doing in conjunction with the main sanctuary, right? This is the Vision series that Pastor Mac is doing, sharing about the vision of living Word, how you can be a part of it, how you can have vision for your own life. This is my last message. Pastor Dustin will wrap up the series on Sunday. So for my last message, I was really praying about what I should talk about, what I want to say to you guys, because honestly, I've said a lot of stuff that is very, very heavy on my heart, like something that I'm very passionate about, you understanding your purpose, your greatness, the vision that God has for you, and working towards that. That's a passion of mine for sure. So I'm like, okay, this third message, we're going to bring it home. What do you want me to say? And then I was actually listening to Pastor Mac this weekend, and he talked about David and Goliath. Now, I know a lot of you guys have heard the story of David and Goliath. In fact, I think I can do this. Raise your hand if you've heard the story of David and Goliath, or at least know David and Goliath. I think just about everybody, not even, sometimes, a lot of even non-Christians know David and Goliath. As a sports fan, they use it all the time when there's like a big underdog, a team that's not supposed to win. They talk about David and Goliath, even though I don't know if they actually know the story, but they know David beat Goliath, right? Sorry, spoiler alert. I'll get to that later in my message. But I want to talk about David today, because David is, now it's not that original for me to say that David's my favorite Bible character, because David's one of like the big 3, 5, what are like the biggest, most popular Bible? Jesus, of course, is one, but he's God. Does that really count? I mean, yes. Moses, Abraham, Elijah, but it's a little more, not as, David's one of the popular, one of the biggest ones, right? So it's not a stretch, and actually probably Joshua might be my favorite, but that's because it's my name. So, but David is awesome, and I love the story of David. I love the way that God put a vision on his heart at a young age, and we get to actually watch him like grow up and see that vision fulfilled. And there's not as many characters in the Bible that we get that kind of depth on. And there's not a lot of characters in literature that we get that kind of depth on, right? I'm a Marvel fan. I like the MCU, especially, let's go Infinity Saga. MCU, multiverse, has some hits and misses. But one of the things I loved about the Infinity Saga MCU was the characters and the way they developed Tony Stark. We got to see him be from selfish to like kind of come around and make the sacrifice. We saw, so I love the character development. So I love reading about David because I love this character, and we get to watch him kind of go through life. So I want to go through this a little bit. I'm not going to read everything because there's a lot. There's a lot about David. Like I said, we get to see his whole life. But I'm gonna highlight some key points as we look through the life of David, right? Like I said, good old-fashioned Bible story, Bible lesson. We're gonna talk about David, okay? So if you're interested, if you've read the story, want to read it again, and I highly recommend you do, if you've read the story, specifically David and Goliath, but because there's a lot to David's life, but specifically if you haven't read David and Goliath in a while, or if you've only heard the stories but never actually read it for yourself, I encourage you to do it because it's good. And in the Bible series, I talked about, like, if you're looking for a place to start, if you're not sure and you're like, the Bible's I'm not sure about it, it's a little confusing, find stories that you can read and characters that you can get in, because that's what gets me hooked. Like, when I'm reading through the Bible, there's some stuff that, I'll be honest, is a little bit tougher to get through, and I'm like, Levitical laws, I'm like, okay, this is, I don't know. But when I get to the stories and the characters in these people's lives, and David is one of the more, like I said, fascinating, interesting people, and I'm sure when we get to heaven, he's got a long line of people waiting to meet David, but I'm going to get in that line. Like, I think that's going to be cool to hear these stories straight from him. How's that for an introduction? Let's talk about David. So the stories in 1 Samuel 16 and 17. 1 Samuel 16 is where we first meet David. 17 is where he fights Goliath, right? So let's start in 1 Samuel 16, verse 6. And actually, Pastor Dustin shared this verse last Sunday, maybe it was Sunday before, but he said, "Now the Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul? See, I have rejected him from reigning over Israel. Fill your horn with oil and go. I am sending you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided myself a king among his sons." So Saul was king, wasn't great, did some stuff, and Samuel the prophet was like weeping over the loss of Saul or what he was going through. And this is what Pastor Dustin was saying, is like, at some point, God's saying, yeah, there's definitely a time and a season to mourn what's been lost, but there's also now, it's time to get up and go what's next. I have something for you next. So maybe some of you are in that season or have been in a season of whether it's a lost relationship or it's people or things in your life that you've lost. There's definitely a time to mourn, and that process looks different for everybody. But at some point, you got to get up. You got to do the next thing. And that's what Samuel is doing. He goes to the house of Jesse, right? And if you guys know the story, Jesse has, I don't remember how many sons he has. He has multiple sons. Samuel comes out. He's like, Jesse's like all proud of his strong young men. And he's like, look at my sons. They're great. One of them is destined to be king, I'm sure. And he goes through all of the sons that Jesse brought out and says, and Samuel is like, no, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. Finally, Samuel says, do you have another son? There's got to be somebody else, because God said it's here. He's here, but you didn't bring him out. And he goes and gets David from the field. And that part always like stood out to me. Like, his own dad didn't even believe in him. Like, so if you've ever felt like overlooked, like maybe you don't have people in your life that believe in you, I'm sorry. Come talk to me, because I believe in you. I support every single one of you, whatever your dreams are, whatever you want to do. I'm here for you. But I've definitely been in places where I've felt overlooked. And this is his own family, his own dad. We don't know a whole lot about his relationship with Jesse. We don't know much about his relationship with his brothers. But this is a dude who, as a young man, I don't know how old he was at the time, but probably a teenager, out in the field doing his work, doing his job, doing what he's supposed to do, taking care of his father's sheep. And he doesn't even get thought about. His dad doesn't even think that, he could be king. And so there might be people in your life, but don't let that be you. When you look in the mirror, don't look and say, that can't be me. It'd be cool to do great things, but God doesn't have that for me. You're going to have enough. Look, honestly, no matter how great you are, you're going to have people in your life that are saying stuff about you, that are saying you can't accomplish all these great things, that you're not good enough, that you're not strong enough, you're not talented enough, whatever. Don't let that be your mirror. Please don't let that be your mirror. When you talk to yourself, when you see, I don't know if y'all talk to yourself as much as I do, but when you're having a conversation with yourself, when you look in the mirror, absolutely encourage yourself. Absolutely understand that even if your own dad does not think you have what it takes, that you do. Because obviously, David did. Spoiler alert, no, we'll get into it. I won't tell you what happens to David after this. But at that moment, he brings David out. Samuel, it says in verse 13, then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him, David, in the midst of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. Samuel arose and went to Ramah. So first of all, David's anointed king. Awesome, right? Huge moment, amazing. I've never been anointed king before. I got to imagine it's pretty cool, especially in front of your brothers. I'm the youngest. I got one older brother, two older sisters. I'd have felt pretty good if somebody came in and anointed me king in front of my older siblings, right? Especially when they didn't even want you out there. But he's anointed king, but he doesn't, it's not like he moves into the palace. First of all, he's only a teenager. He's not ready to be king yet. But Saul is still king. There's still a king over Israel in the palace. So there's this excitement of, wow, I'm king. Maybe the weight of, wow, that's a big deal. But then it's like, but wait, not yet, right? I don't know if any of you guys have ever been here before, but God's given me things. Maybe he spoke to you at camp. Maybe during this vision series when we encouraged you to take some time to pray about vision, about dreams, about what God has for you. Maybe God gave you something and is like, yes, you're going to be this. You're going to do this. Talk about you guys being created for greatness. There's greatness out there, but it might not be today. God might give you something that you have to hold on to for the future, right? So when David was anointed king, he had to hold on to that. Another side note from this, when I was reading this, because so Pastor Mac preached about David and Goliath, and I wanted to reread it for myself because I know the story, I've heard it, I've read it, but I wanted to read it again and see what stuck out to me, what the Lord kind of showed me during this. And one of the things that stuck out in this verse says, so Samuel arose and went to Ramah. So Samuel anoints him, says, you're about to be king, and then leaves. And I'm sure Samuel probably hears the voice better than I do, and that's exactly what God told him to do, anoint him and leave. But good leadership should help train up the next leader, right? I'm not saying Samuel did anything wrong. I'm sure that's what he was supposed to do. But if you're leading someone, you should be training up the next people to take your place. But what I want to hear, because this story is about David, focus on David now. Samuel just anointed him and left. And I don't know, again, I can relate to this because I felt like God might have big things for me, but I need somebody to help me, to show me, to train me. And you guys are probably maybe thinking that same thing too, which again, talk to me. Let me help you along the way. Pastor Dustin, the adult leaders we have in the room, if your parents or teachers or mentors aren't there, you don't have that relationship with them, then let us be that. But even if you don't feel like you have somebody in your life like that, God can still train you, grow you, disciple you, develop you. So don't get stuck on that. So that was just because I was kind of upset or offended for David when Samuel just left. But I think that's important that God can still raise you up, right? So he might give you a vision for later, but I think it's key is what you do when God gives you that vision, when God gives you dreams, when God gives you a word for later, what do you do? Okay? Verse 19 says, therefore Saul sent messenger, I'll explain this in a second, but therefore Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, send me your son David, who is with the sheep. Okay, so the point of it, David went right back to the sheep. David was anointed king, was like, yes, I'm about to be king. You guys didn't even want me, but I'm about to be king. But he isn't king right away. So he goes back to to take care of his father's sheep, to go do what he's supposed to do in that season. And it's so important that no matter where you believe God is calling you to go eventually, that you're faithful to serving in this season, right? I've talked about this all of the time. You're probably sick of me saying this. But if you're here in this youth group, God has called you to be a part of this youth group for a reason. For this season, this is where you're called to be. And yes, that does mean serving on the worship team if you can sing. Don't try to audition if you can't sing. They don't need people that can't sing. But if you can sing, if you can play an instrument, audition for the worship team. Go talk to Noah after service. And yes, we need, connectors. We need, volunteers, leaders, small group leaders on Sundays. We need all that. But I also need you, God needs you to play your part in the relationships with the people here. I need you guys, because look, let me be honest with you. There are people that come to this, whether it's probably more on Sundays than Wednesdays, whose parents just drop them off. But if they don't ever make a connection here, they're not going to get everything that God has for them here. And we have great volunteers, people like Daniel, Trish, that do a great job connecting with the students. But we can only do so much. It means so much more when another youth reaches out to them and talks to them. So what I need you guys to do, whether you're officially on some sort of serving team or not, I need you to connect with these other youth. I say this almost every time, learn somebody's name. Like it's great when you can say hi to somebody and welcome them, but when you can remember their name the next time they come, so much bigger, so much better. And so when I say, go out, have fun, hang out with people, yes, hang out with your friends. I'm glad you guys have friends here, but maybe include other people. Invite them to play 9 Square with you. Be the church, the community to people in this group. Like, this is part of what God's called you to do in this season. There's other things God's called you to do, like get good grades. Maybe you're on a basketball team and you can obviously play hard, but also you can, talk with your friends. You can share Jesus with them. You can be there when they need someone. All of that is great. Encourage them. But I just really want to encourage you that no matter what great things that God has for you in the future, God has something for you to do right now. And you need to be faithful in what he's called you to do right now. David went back to the sheep. That's important. He still did what he was called to do. Honestly, if it was me, which is why I'm not called to be king of nothing, because if God would have called me to be king and then told me to go back to the sheep, I'm like, no, I'm about to be king. Like, I'm too good for sheep. I'm sorry. That's just me. I'm working on it. I'm not perfect. I would not have gone back to the sheep, but David went back to the sheep, okay? The reason why Saul was looking for David, or said to go get David, is because Saul was being tormented by an evil spirit, it says. And his people said, if you get someone to play music for you, it'll help drive the spirit away and bring peace. They said, Jesse has this son named David, maybe try him, right? So he did. So he sent for David. He said, I know that David's out with the sheep, but go get him, bring him to the palace, because I need him to play music for me. And again, if I'm David, I'm like, this is it. I made it. I'm going to the palace. This is my call, right? This is the moment. This is what I've been waiting for. And he gets there, and they're like, we need you to play music over here in the corner. You're not sitting on the throne yet. We need you to serve in the kingdom. And then it says in verse 21, David came to Saul and entered into his service. Saul liked him very much. That's a good thing. And David became one of his armor bearers. So here's David. I want you guys to because I'm reading the story, and I'm like, man, I can identify with this so much. Like, he's there. He's at the palace. He knows he's going to be king, but he's got to serve this other king. He doesn't get to sit on the throne. He serves this other king who, by the way, the reason why David was anointed to replace him, because Saul had gotten wicked. Saul was not obeying the Lord. Saul was not a good, godly king. And David was asked to serve this unrighteous king, this king who's not living for God anymore, this king who is being tormented by an evil spirit. And David plays music, and the spirit leaves, and it soothes Saul. But if I'm David, again, I'm like, look, this is who you have as king. He's tormented by an evil spirit. Like, he's not even right. Like, he's got this going on, and I'm supposed to be king, and I'm this good kid who's been serving my dad's house. I know I'm supposed to be king. I was anointed by the prophet. But he doesn't complain. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't start a fight. He doesn't abort the plan that God has for him early because things got difficult or things didn't feel right in the moment. He stays faithful in that season. He continues to serve where God's called him to serve, even though he's serving under an unrighteous king. That's next level, right? It's easy to serve, right? Pastor Mac talked about it in his vision series. forget which Sunday it was, but he talked about serving under another man's vision. And that's so important for you in your life, and not just you, I mean any of us, to serve in somebody else's vision first. And to be honest, there's sometimes when I get really excited about whether it's Pastor Mac's vision and church planning, whatever, there's different things, nonprofits, things that I've just been excited about, and it's been really easy for me to like come in and serve and be a part of the things that they're doing. But David was asked to serve not necessarily in a super exciting, fun role. I'm sure he liked playing music. I'm sure he was very good at it. It was fun for him. But he was in a servant role in the kingdom, in the palace, where he was called to be king eventually. But in that moment, this is what he was called to be faithful to. All right, let's jump to the next chapter because this is where it gets exciting. This is what you guys want to talk about, right? The fight, David and Goliath. All right? 1 Samuel 17, verse 3 and 4. It says, the Philistines, I'm going to paint the picture. Even if you don't think you know the story, let me paint the picture for a second. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side. Israel stood on a mountain on the other side with a valley between them. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. I'll be honest with you, I don't know how big that is. I tried to look it up, and there's like different people of what exactly a cubit was. It's big. All I know is he was big. He was a big dude, okay? The smallest number I found was 6'9", which I've also heard that he was like over 9 feet tall, which is 9 feet tall is huge, ridiculous. 6'9" is still pretty big, right? Who's the tallest person in the room right now? Daniel, how tall are you? 6'2"? Anybody taller than 6'2"? How tall are you? Like 6'2" about? How tall are you? You're pretty tall. 6'3", 6'4". Okay, so I think Luke wins. I think he's the tallest in the room. We're talking 6'3", 6'4", probably depends on the shoes he's wearing. I like to wear Timbs in the winter because that gives me an extra inch or two. But we're talking 4, 5 inches taller than you. And this isn't basketball reference. We're not talking about Wemby, who's like all scrawny, right? This is like a big dude. Like he's built, right? At that, maybe he's 6'9", maybe he's 9 feet. Either way, he's a big dude, okay? Intimidating, right? Just trying to paint the picture for you on how big Goliath is. So this big dude comes out and says, we don't need a whole war. Send your best guy out here. I'll take him. If I kill your best dude, then we own you guys. You're our slaves. If you got a guy that can kill me, you can have all of the Philistine army. You can have every single one of them because he was that confident. And the crazy thing is, nobody in Israel stepped up. Nobody wanted to challenge him. I don't know if you guys would challenge a dude that big and that strong and that cocky talking all this trash, but nobody in Israel did, okay? David, let's read verse 14 through 17. Go back to David. David was the youngest, and the 3 oldest followed Saul. So his 3 older brothers were at the battle. But David occasionally went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. So not only is he serving in the palace, he's still going back and feeding the sheep because that's still what he's supposed to do in this season. So he's still taking care of his dad's sheep, which is crazy to me. And the Philistine drew near, so Goliath came out and presented himself for 40 days, morning and evening. So twice a day for 40 days, this dude comes out and just taunts the Israel army, and nobody steps up to the plate. Nobody wants to fight him. Then Jesse said to his son David, now take your brothers an ephah of this dried grain and the 10 loaves and run to your brothers at camp. So he goes, gives them some food to bring to camp. Like he's an errand boy for him, right? But he does it. David's faithful to what his father asked him to do, right? He gets out there. He hears Goliath come out and taunt them because remember he's doing this twice a day for 40 days. He hears Goliath. He kind of asks what's going on, like who is this guy? What's going on? What happens to if somebody kills him? What do they get? Right? There's like tax exempt status and Saul's daughter or something like that. All this stuff, and he's just asking questions. He's curious. I'd be curious too, I guess. And his older brother, like not only like dismisses him, but like kind of gets mad. Says he gets angry. He's like, "What are you doing here? Like you don't belong here." Once again, he tells David, "You don't belong here. You're too small, you're too young, go back to the sheep. Why are you out here?" He says, "Oh, you're just arrogant, you just want to see the battle, you just want to be a part of it." And then David says, and I love this, "What have I done now? Is there not a cause?" The title of my message is, David had a cause before he was king. David goes out to battle. Everything he's been through, all of the faithfulness he's had in each season, he gets out to this battle, and this big dude where every other member of the Israeli army is afraid of him. And David's like, "You're really going to let him come out twice a day for 40 days and talk trash about our God, about the God of Israel? You're really going to let him do that? Is there not a cause?" And I love that because there is a cause. There is something worth fighting for, and you should have something in your life, things in your life that are worth fighting for. You should have a cause. Now, I'm not saying literally go out and try to kill a giant. That's mean to tall people, okay? Some tall people are nice, right? My brother-in-law is 6'8", so he's the tallest person that I've met outside of, like, NBA players. Like, I got to work with Cat at one point, like a 7-footer. Like, that's a whole nother level of tall. I tell people the only time I feel short in my life is when I worked in the NBA. I worked for the Wolves for a while in the video department. And then when I take family pictures with Jocelyn's family, because her dad's 6'5". She has one brother that's I think he's 6'5", 6'4", and then she's got another brother that's 6'8". And so I'm 6'2" on a good day. I tell myself that. Maybe 6'2.5" with Tim's on. But in the family pictures, I feel so short. But that's a personal problem. I'm working through that. But there is a cause. There should be something in your life worth fighting for, worth going after. Even in this season, even if God's given you dreams out here, yes, pursue those, pursue him, absolutely. But also in this season, there should be a cause. I love this because, again, if I'm David, I know I'm going to be king someday, right? He was anointed king. When I'm king, then I'll do this. When I'm king, I'm going to defeat these enemies. When I'm king, I'm going to give money to the poor. I'm going to do this, do that. A lot of us probably have dreams or things. I remember, again, wanted to be in the NBA when I grew up, right? That was my dream. I was like, I will absolutely come back to Brooklyn Park and fix up a park, right? I saw Kevin Garnett did it to his hometown he's originally from South Carolina. I saw these athletes that gave back to their community. KG also opened a computer center in Minneapolis, did all this stuff for kids to learn computers, which was a big deal back then, because back then not everybody had a computer in their pocket at all times. Kids had to like go somewhere to learn how to use a computer. Yeah, it was a different world. Crazy times back in the 90s, let me tell you. But I was like, yes, when I make millions in the NBA, I will give back to my community. Absolutely, 100%. That was absolutely a part of my vision. I knew I was going to do that. But you can do stuff now, too. You don't have to wait until someday. And that's what I think with David, I think it would have been easy to say, when I'm king, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do this. But David had a cause before he was king. And he said, no, right now, there is a cause worth fighting for. And I'm telling you, if you don't have a cause in your life, if you don't have a strong enough why for what you're doing, you're going to give up when it gets hard, when you face opposition. You're going to give up maybe when it takes longer than you thought it was going to. Maybe you just get apathetic, lethargic, because you're like, I was really excited about this dream God gave me at camp, but it's been a couple months now, and it's cold, and it gets dark really early. Am I really going to like put out that much energy, and am I still passionate about it again? Now, what happens is a lot of us, then we go to camp next year, and we get excited again, and then it starts to fade. It's a whole cycle. Doesn't actually do a lot of good for us. But I'm saying, find a cause in your life. If you look around the world right now, I guarantee you can find something. I guarantee you God will tell you something that you can have a cause. And I said, even if it's just meeting people, making friends in this youth group, learning some names, that is a cause that you can take up right now in this season. You don't have to be rich, famous, popular, cool, talented, whatever, to reach people in this youth group, to talk to people, to learn a name, right? Real quick on the name thing. I used to think I'm just not good at names, and so I just didn't try. I met a guy when I was in South Dakota. I was working for a news station out there. I had just moved out there, and this guy was the lieutenant governor, and he was doing a press conference, shook his hand afterward, met him, said, yeah, I'm new to South Dakota, news reporter. my name's Josh, whatever. Talked for like 2 seconds. There was other reporters there. It was a press conference. Months later, Lieutenant Governor is now running for governor of South Dakota. So he has met so many people, shaken so many hands, kissed so many babies, and just politician, right? I run into him again. Kiss babies, you never heard that expression? Like kiss their foreheads? Yeah, you looking at me like I'm crazy, Ashley. Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing, okay? Don't worry about it. It's an expression. It's a thing. But he had met all these people, and I ran into him. I was doing another story at the Capitol, and he goes, oh, Josh, right? How's your move to South Dakota been? How do you like being a reporter in our state? And I was like blew my mind. He even met so many people. He remembered my name, remembered that I was new, he remembered my job. I was like, granted, he's got a special gift from the Lord, and to be a politician, to do what he did, sure, good for him. But I think if he can know that much about me in that situation, I can do better at learning people's names. So I've made it intentional. I learn. I try to use other famous people's names so I remember it. So like Lila, you brought your friend Kendrick. Lila's easy because I have a niece named Lila. You brought your friend Kendrick to the Bible study. Kendrick Lamar. Sorry, I probably shouldn't talk about him at church, but there's a rapper named Kendrick Lamar. I'm sure none of you guys have heard of him because you guys all only listen to Christian music, but that helps me remember. So when Kendrick came back, I was like, oh yeah, Kendrick, like Kendrick Lamar. Remember his name. So if that helps you, that's a free thing to remember people's names. Try to in your head, think of somebody, whatever. Okay, so that can be a cause worth fighting for. The people in this room absolutely are worth fighting for. Absolutely, every person in this room is worth fighting for. And if they're sitting by themselves and now some people, we like to sit by ourselves, we like a little space, that's fine. But you can invite them to play a 9 square, to play a video game. The people in this room, and it doesn't have to be hard, but are worth fighting for. And this is where you're called for this season. Okay, let's keep going. David had a cause before he was king, right? David had a cause, didn't wait until I'm king. He was king. He knew he was going to be king. There wasn't a question, right? There wasn't sometimes we doubt, did God really say that? He was anointed by the prophet. He was going to be king. It would have been very easy for him to say, when I'm then. Because you know what kind of impact you can have on the world when you're a king of a nation? I've never been king before, but I'm guessing a lot, right? Okay, so he says there's a cause. He's willing to fight for it. He goes to Saul. He says, let me take this big dude. I can take him, no big deal. And Saul says, oh yeah, let me give you my armor. Let me give you a sword. David can't walk in it. It's too heavy. It doesn't fit him right. This is David. This is Saul trying to have David fit into his box, into his life, into what he's been called to do. The armor fits Saul just fine, although he was too scared to use it. Different conversation for another day. Armor fits Saul. That role fits Saul. Did not fit King David. Sorry, wasn't king yet. No spoilers. David did not fit him. David couldn't fight Goliath Saul's way. Whatever you have to fight, whatever you have to do, whatever God calls you to do, you have to do it the way that he's created and called you to do it. You can't do it like somebody else. You can't try to be like Connor, right? I mean, Connor's cool. I would want to be like Connor, but you can't. We already have Connor. Connor's got to be Connor. You got to be you. You have to do it the way that you've been created and called to do it, right? Even if it doesn't make sense to you, didn't make sense to Saul, probably didn't make sense to David. I don't know, maybe it did, but might not make sense to the world, right? Why would you not take this armor and this sword? Why would you grab rocks, right? But that's what God told him to do, so that's what he did, right? So he goes and gets these 5 rocks. By the way, while David, you guys probably know the story, while David was out in the sheep, watching the sheep, out in the field watching the sheep, he had to defend the sheep from a lion, from a bear, who knows what else, when else, and he learned how to use that slingshot. So while he was out in the field, not only did he learn faithfulness, not only did he maybe help him get his heart in the right place, because 90% of the time when God's asking us to wait on something, it's because we got to get our heart right, because we're not in a place where we can actually receive everything that he has for us. But he learns how to use this slingshot to kill the lion and the bear. He gains confidence that he can do this. So then when he goes out to face Goliath, he just takes those 5 smooth stones and his slingshot, and he walks out. Verse 45 says, then David said to the Philistine, I like calling him the Philistine. I don't like using his name, just the Philistine, just some guy, the Philistine. David said to the Philistine, you come at me, so set the scene. The Philistine is talking all sorts of trash. just like real bad about enslaving the people, feeding their carcass to the birds, bad stuff, defiling God, all this bad stuff. So David comes back with his own trash talk. Now, normally I say be nice to people, don't talk trash, but sometimes you got to get a little nasty. You got to say a little bit. You got to get a little righteous anger, right? Even Jesus overturned the temple table at one time. So David comes out and he says, "You come at me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come at you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you," which is crazy. "And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines," he's got his own trash talk, "to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. The assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with the sword and the spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." So first of all, great trash talking. Phenomenal. David's very good at this, right? Well, and he's good with words. You guys have read Psalms, right? Most of those he wrote. He's very good with words. But this is what he says. This is David's cause. He says, I'm gonna kill Goliath. I'm gonna cut off your head, by the way, which is, don't say that to people. This is a different time, different situation. But pretty awesome. But then he says that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. The crazy thing about David, spoiler alert, he eventually became king. Before David became king, he had a cause. And David is actually more known for his cause than his kingdom. He is more known as killing Goliath than King David. And I know all of you probably know him as King David. You guys are great kids, read your Bible, go to church. But in the world, they all know the story of David and Goliath. Like I said, every sporting event with a big underdog, they all talk about David and Goliath. They don't talk about King David. They don't talk about what he did as king. They talk about when he defeated Goliath, the cause that he fought for. So if you're waiting until later, till your kingdom, to do something great, you're going to miss this opportunity. You might miss this opportunity that God can use in a big way, that all the earth will know there is a God in Israel. And by the way, even now, thousands of years later, people know about God and how strong he is and how powerful he is, and that the battle is his because of the cause that David fought for, because of what David did way before he was ever king. All right, let's jump ahead a long ways. David, because his story doesn't end there. His story doesn't end there. I know I'm going to go quick here because I don't want to go spend too much time on this, but his story doesn't end here. David and Saul had this whole epic battle where Saul's trying to kill David, but David doesn't try to kill him, which is a crazy thing. Again, king goes crazy. He's trying to kill you after you've served him, after you've killed the giant, done all these things for him. Now he's trying to kill you, and David's just like, nope, I'm good. I'm going to be faithful to God. I'm not going to go back after Saul. Crazy, weird game of a fight when only one person's trying to fight and the other person's like, whoa, hold on, I don't need to fight you. This happens for years, hiding in a cave, all this stuff. David eventually becomes king. Saul dies, David becomes king. And you're like, yeah, happy ending. David's king, it's great. He's conquering, he's fighting all these nations. But I don't want to stop there because life is a little more complicated than that, right? I like the hero's journey of small David over here overcomes these things, becomes king. That's great. But maybe the second thing that David is known for after killing Goliath, maybe third, because music, Psalms is probably up there too, but is Bathsheba. And I think most of you maybe know the story. If you don't know the story, David was king. He was supposed to be out at war with his men. Wasn't. He stayed home. He's like, I'm king. I don't need that. He sees a woman bathing on the roof. He's king, so he's like, come get me. Sleeps with her, which, if you want the G-rated version, there's rubber duckies and VeggieTales, and he sees a duck that he wants, and he goes gets the duck. So if you guys aren't ready for the adult content, then you can just imagine a duck, that he wants a duck, and he goes and gets this rubber ducky, okay? He takes something that's not his, right? He sleeps with Bathsheba. She gets pregnant. Bathsheba's husband is out at war. Uriah is out at war where David should have been, okay? This is not good, okay? This is an example of David messing up. For the record, if you don't know David and Bathsheba, it's a bad thing, right? The other stuff I said, this is David This is a bad thing David did. So Uriah is out at battle. David calls for him to come back and says, you know what, you've been working hard. Come home, stay a night with your wife, see what happens. And Uriah can't, he says, my men are out in battle. I can't even enter my house. And he sleeps outside. And he's like, I can't enjoy my wife when I know that my men are dying out there, which, by the way, is what David should have been thinking as king, but he wasn't. So Uriah goes back to the war. David gives him a note, which I think is just the meanest thing ever, gives him a note to give to his leader and says, put Uriah on the front lines. Uriah goes on the front lines, dies in battle where David should have been fighting. David basically had him killed because he slept with his wife, she got pregnant, and he was going to get caught. So he had her killed. Okay? David then, Uriah's gone. They get married. They get together. I don't know what that looks like in Kings and whatever. He had a few wives. Bathsheba, the son that they had, David, they lose. That son that she got pregnant with from then, they lose. And there's another beautiful moment, and for time, I'm not gonna read this whole thing, but there's this moment where David he knows his son is dying, and he's praying and fasting and weeping that God would spare his son. His son dies, and his men are too scared to tell him that his son is dead. But he can tell. It says that he hears them and he knows. And he gets up, and he washes his clothes, he gets dressed, and he's like, okay, let's go. And now I'm not saying it's tough, and every grieving process looks different for everyone, so I'm not trying to rush the grieving process with you, but again, this is where we see somebody, they mourn, but when they're gone, when that thing in your life is gone, when that season is over, when that relationship breaks off that God removed, or whatever the reason is, I don't know all of the reason and what's going on, but when that's over, when it's time to move on, eventually you gotta do something. You gotta do what's next. So he gets up, and then it says that he comforted Bathsheba. She got pregnant again, and his son was Solomon. For those of you Bible scholars in the room, Solomon takes the throne after David. When David dies, the throne goes to Solomon. He becomes king. He is heir to the kingdom. He's the one that actually builds the temple for God. This is a product of David's mistake. Becomes heir to the throne, builds the temple. And I say this because I talked about, and this is very important that in chess, you got to look ahead. You got to see moves ahead. You have to make decisions for the long-term gain. You can't sacrifice your long-term win for what God has for you for a temporary high, for something right now that feels good in the moment, that seems good, that makes you happy right now. You have to play the long game. You have to understand that. But if you make a mistake, it's okay. God is so much bigger than your mistakes. And not only did God still use David, despite of this, I would say a pretty bad mistake. Like, this is a big deal. But he literally used that mistake to be king of the nation, to succeed him on the throne, to build his temple, to build the temple for God. Because here's the thing. We tried talking about this in the Bible study yesterday. All right? You guys were there. We tried talking about this in Bible study, and it's kind of confusing and complicated. God is outside of time. God sees all of this. He knows all of this. God absolutely has a plan for your life. There is a best-case scenario where you never make any mistakes. But God knows you're going to make mistakes. And God, it's not that he, erases your story and starts over, or he has to, this. Yeah, it might be complicated. It might be a process of you kind of working back depending on what decision you did, what mistake you made. But God will take that mistake and make it a part of his plan. God is absolutely bigger than your mistakes, and he can not only use you even after your mistakes, but he can use your mistake. There was a message that Pastor Jim preached years ago, and this quote still sticks in my head. He said, God will take your mistakes and make them part of his plan. So I was trying to use the example of, because in my head this kind of made sense, the visualization of the show Loki. Again, I'm not telling you from the stage that you should watch Loki necessarily, but I've already talked about how much I like the MCU. Season 2 just ended, no spoilers. But in Loki, they have this sacred timeline of like, this is he who remains, is like controlling, this is how the life is supposed to live. And if you get off course, you're like, they prune you, whatever, it's a whole thing. But in that show, I have the visualization of I make a mistake, I do something wrong. And when I say mistakes, I'm not even talking about just sins, bad things you shouldn't be doing, but like, for me, I'm like, did I pick the right college? Did I take the right job? Did I do this? Even if you make a mistake, God can use that. So I went to Oral Roberts University. Maybe God wanted me to stay here and go to Bethel. That's fine. I went to ORU. I got my degree, paid a bunch of money to ORU. That is now God's plan. And where it gets complicated is like, well, God already knew what I was going to do anyways. It gets a little complicated. It hurts my head a little bit. But it's not like a branch timeline where you start doing, it's God. Well, it's more of a branch timeline. You go in a different direction, but that's still his plan, right? It's not like it's complicated. That's still his plan, right? People will say stuff like, oh, I had to go through this because God needed me to go through this terrible whatever situation. No, God didn't need you to. God absolutely could have used you in a great life. You make all good decisions. But because you made that bad decision and put yourself in a bad spot, God's now going to use that bad spot that you put yourself in to be a testimony, to help other people, to do other things, right? God will use those things. But there's still a cost. It's not like God just erases it and nothing ever happened. You look at this story here, David lost his son. Uriah lost his life, right? Maybe you don't care about other people. Maybe you just care about yourself. David did lose his son. And Uriah lost his life. Other people could be hurt and affected. So this is not a do whatever you want right now because you're young and God will turn it around and you'll someday have a testimony to tell. If you make mistakes, absolutely God can use those mistakes. God will use you. He'll make it part of the plan. But it's not without consequence, right? So to those of you that haven't made your mistakes yet, we've all made mistakes. But if you're like thinking like, oh, let me make a bunch of mistakes and do stupid stuff, there's consequences. You could get hurt. People could get hurt. Things could happen. There's people that thought they could just have fun in the moment in this season, and then they lost their life and never will get a chance to see what God had for them. So I'm not saying that there's no consequences. What I'm saying is if you've made a mistake, or like eventually in life, when you do make a mistake, because you will, we all mess up, right? Don't worry so much. Don't beat yourself up. Just go back to God and allow him to work that out for his good, right? The last thing about David I want to share, well, let me say this. You can avoid pain and heartache by doing it right the first time, right? If you've made a mistake or when you do make a mistake, it's not over because God can still use you, and not just use you, but use that very mistake that you made as part of his plan now. Do you understand that? Like, that's important to me that you understand that God can still use you. You can't mess up so much that you can't go back to God. That's never a thing. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that someone's messed up enough they can't go back to God. Now, there's people that mess up and don't go back to God, but you can always go back to God, right? The last thing is Acts 3:36, New Testament, talking about David in the past. It says, now when David had served God's purpose in his own generation, he fell asleep. He was buried with his ancestors, and his body decayed. Kind of depressing. But I love that when David served God's purpose in his own generation. Talking about vision, talking about dreams, talking about what you want to do. When I die, hopefully it's a long ways away. Hopefully I got a lot of time left on this earth. But no matter when I go, that's what I want said about me. You might want people to say nice things about you, and I hope people do say nice things about me. I hope they say that I was a nice guy. I hope they say that I made their life better in some way. But they're not. But that's not that big of a deal to me. It's not as important that people liked me, or that I was popular, or that I made a lot of money, or had really nice shoes. What matters, what I want said at my funeral, is that I served God's purpose for my generation. And that's what I want for every single one of you. I know you guys are young and hopefully not thinking about that yet. But one, you can't serve God's purpose if your life ends early. So don't do anything stupid or allow anything stupid to happen to you like that. But God has a purpose for you when he created you. And I hope that whatever dreams, visions, things he gave you, that you live those out and you pursue those so that at the end of your life, they can write about you, that you served God's purpose in your own generation. That when your life is over, you served God's purpose. That's what I want said about me, right? I want people to say that I served God's purpose. And I don't want to die young because I think God has a lot more for me, right? So I don't think I served my purpose. If you die at a young age, God has so much for you. God has so many big dreams, things for you to do. Serve God's purpose. Do what he's called you to do, right? That's what I want at my funeral. I hope that's what you would want at yours. And I'm going to close real quick by running through the vision that Pastor Mac has been teaching about and the vision that Living Word has, because I think it's important that you guys understand that. I know it's a little bit different in the youth ministry, but obviously you guys are here on Sundays, so you're probably not hearing Pastor Mac is teaching. And I want to make sure that you guys understand this so you can at least in your heart pray for what we're doing and be a part of what God is doing here at Living Word. So one of the big things, the biggest thing, the most money is the church planting initiative. I'm not going to go into a bunch of time because I couldn't do it justice on how important this is, this church planting initiative that Living Word is doing right now. It's a huge thing. It's a great opportunity to make disciples. Like Pastor Mac says, you make disciples by leaving a church. So if you want to be a part of that, let me know. Definitely pray about it, and you can give to it financially if you want to. But I want to make sure that you guys know this. And all the details have not been figured out yet. I apologize. Things are moving a lot. But what's been on Pastor Dustin's heart is that he's talked with Pastor Kent and some of the church planting people, that we as a youth ministry could raise money and actually build a youth center at one of these churches. So that's going to be something that comes. I don't have a lot to announce, honestly. It's something that's going to happen, and we will let you know when that's coming, and we will do probably a campaign, and we'll talk about it. And it's a really cool opportunity for us as a youth ministry to affect youth on the other side of the world, right? Really cool opportunity. So I just want to give you guys kind of a heads up, be praying about that. We'll let you know more details as that come. The Winter's Minute is a part of it, if you guys know about that. There's a Get Connected Center that they want to do down in the other end of the building. The Compass Ministry, I don't know how much you guys know about the Compass Ministry. We have a really cool special needs ministry in our church. Not a lot of churches get to do this, but we have people that care about that, want to do that, and they're going to build their own designated space for them. Right now they're meeting in basically a multi-purpose room down here. They're going to move them down here to be a part of where the youth ministry and the kids ministry are. Really cool thing. If you're interested in serving in Compass, or if you just want to pray for it, like pray for them. But if special needs is on your heart, like it's amazing. Like I served one day just to see what it was like, and I can't describe. It was amazing. It was so cool to see these kids. And the thing is, they're not just Christine Susty, Brandon's wife. You guys know Brandon. His wife runs the ministry. It's not just about like babysitting the kids or keeping them safe, which is important, right? But like they're teaching them about Jesus and showing them that they have value, because in the world, a lot of people don't see value in them. And that's so sad and breaks my heart to even say that. But she's continuing to remind them that God made them for a purpose as well. And it's a beautiful thing. If you want to be a part of the Compass Ministry, let me know. But for sure, keep it in your prayers. The last thing is the internship. And I don't want to, I've taken way too long. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the internship, but I have to share about it because it's on my heart. And I'm really excited that it's a part of the church's vision this year. So years ago, we did an internship. It a lot of different reasons stopped. We're doing it again. We're starting it next fall. And what it is, it's 18 through 29. If you're out of high school to 29. Specifically, though, if you graduate high school and you're like, I'm not sure what I want to do, this is something you should check out. You should come talk to me. Me and Pastor Dustin, we had a meeting, a great meeting this week, talking about it. It's going to be a part of the Next Gen ministry, which means me and Pastor Dustin will be involved. And it's going to be a really cool thing where you'll have an opportunity to earn college credits at Southeastern University in Florida if you want to. So even if you're like, I want to go to college, but let me take this time first, you can do that. But really, it's the college classes, it's Bible curriculum, learning more about the Word, learning more about your identity, your purpose, what God's called you to do. But then hands-on training in ministry here at Living Word. If you want to go into ministry, but even if you want to go into business, we want to give you like real practical skills that will help you in the business world, no matter what you go into. So if you're interested in that, especially like seniors or even like juniors, or if you're younger and you're curious about at some point doing it, but this is something that Pastor Mac has made a part of our vision for this year. So there will be funds dedicated to it. And I'm really excited that our head pastor is so bought in. If you heard him talk about it, he's excited about this too. And it's really exciting to have the support from our head pastor like that. But I really cannot stress enough, at least pray about this internship if you want to be a part of it. That's all I'm going to talk about. I went way too long. I'm sorry. I apologize. But we still have time to play 9 Square and do some fun stuff. Let me pray real quick. Lord, thank you so much for the words that you had said. Lord, I pray that everything that you wanted said was heard somehow, and that they got what you wanted for them from this message, in this day, in the worship. Whatever it is, Father, we thank you, Lord, that you go with us throughout the day, that you continue to be with us when we play 9 Square or video games or whatever it is that we do when we go home at school tomorrow. We thank you, Lord, that you are with us at all times, Lord. We pray that you help us to find that cause in this season. We have dreams and goals and things that you have for us, purposes and plans down the road. But right now in this season, Lord, we seek you and what you have for us, Lord. Tell us what to do, where to go, and it's your job to make it happen, Lord. We trust you to lead us in the right way and to make these plans come to fruition, Lord, what you have for us. We just thank you for this. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, once again, if you guys want to come up for prayer or to talk about things, we got people here that want to do that for you. Otherwise, go play some 9 Square video games, make some friends. We are doing a little photo shoot over here with some people if you want to, I don't know, take some pictures too, I guess.